Apologies in advance for my voice. Of course I would catch a cold the second week I decided to start doing this again, but the news stops for no man. This week marked a major milestone for the gaming community's biggest charity fundraiser. Speedrunners from across the globe gathered in Orlando, Florida to celebrate 10 years of awesome games done quick, a week-long marathon of top-tier gaming to raise money for the Prevent Cancer Foundation. AGDQ alone has raised more than $11 million since its start in 2010, and this year's event added more than $3 million more to that total, setting a new record for the January fundraiser. In other gaming news, Nintendo and Game Freak updated the Pokemon community on new projects in the pipe for 2020 with a dedicated Pokemon Direct. In the Direct, Nintendo announced a new Pokemon Mystery Dungeon game for the Switch. Due out on March 6th, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Rescue Team DX sports a really nice watercolor art style, kind of like a cross between Pokemon and Winnie the Pooh. But moving on to the main event, DLC expansions have been announced for Pokemon Sword and Shield. In lieu of the traditional third game for the generation, additional content for this generation will come in the form of 2 DLC packages. The first of the expansions, Isle of Armor, due out this June, will introduce a new area to explore, new clothing options, new characters, and, of course, new Pokemon. Upon arrival on the Isle, you'll be given an adorable Cubfu, a fighting-type Pokemon that will eventually evolve into an Urshifu, with one of 2 legendary-looking forms. For those distraught about the Dexit, good news! More than 200 previously cut Pokemon are being added back into the roster, including the Gen 1 starters with new Gigantamax forms. Other classics being reintroduced include Slowpoke, which gets a new Galarian form that can be captured in the game right now, though you will have to wait for the DLC to see what it evolves into. Coming later this fall, the Crown Tundra will kick the metagame in the teeth by introducing even more legacy Pokemon. Specifically, nearly every legendary Pokemon you can think of. The legendary Reggie Pokemon seem to be tied to the lore of the island, including 2 new Reggies to add to the family. And most interesting, it appears that Galarian versions of the legendary Bird Trio will also be running around. The expansion pass will cost $30 for each version of the game, however, before you balk at the restored Pokemon being locked behind a paywall, don't fret yet. For those without the expansion, the base game will still be updated to allow transfer of those Pokemon through trading or from Pokemon Home. And speaking of Pokemon Home, it looks like the new Pokemon transferring service will be launching in February, so get your banks ready. In other news, Scott Derrickson announced this week that he has parted ways with Marvel in directing Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, citing creative differences. The decision seems to be mutual, as much as these things can be, and Derrickson will be staying on as an executive producer. Moving on to movies that are a little closer to release, this week brings us Bad Boys for Life. As is traditional for buddy cop franchises, Will Smith and Martin Lawrence reunite for one last action romp while dealing with the recognition that they are getting too old for this shit. Next up, shifting gears into something a little more kid-friendly, there's Doolittle. Robert Downey Jr. and a celebrity-filled voice cast of animals go on a wild adventure to discover the origins of whatever accent that's supposed to be. Also, there's a dragon. Over on television, starting this week on HBO, is The Outsider, a gritty Stephen King murder mystery about... I'm not entirely sure, but it looks kinda neat. And on Syfy, The Magicians is back for Season 5. This is one I need to catch up on. What started as a dark parody of Harry Potter really stepped up into an interesting world of its own. Still super dark, but interesting. In anime, Mikoto Misaka is back on Crunchyroll for a 3rd series of A Certain Scientific Railgun, so get ready for more adventures as the Level 5 Electromaster navigates the world of magic users, espers, and middle school all at once. Meanwhile, on Funimation, Id Invaded is about a self-proclaimed brilliant detective that dives into the mind of killers to solve mysteries. Trippy, but it looks neat. For a blast from the past, Sorceress Stabber Orphan has been remade to celebrate its 25th anniversary. It's always neat to see modern animation mixed with classic storylines. And for even more action fantasy, there's Plunderer. I don't know who these people are or why they are fighting, but it looks cool. Over in video games, releasing this week on Steam is Knock Harder Useless, a kind of spooky and surreal isometric shooter that makes you wonder whether or not you are inside your own dream. It's a good week for JRPG fans as Koei Tecmo is putting out not 1, not 2, but 3 deluxe editions of the Atelier series across all platforms. Atelier Aisha, the Alchemist of Dusk, Atelier Eshka and Logi, Alchemists of the Dusk Sky, and Atelier Shali, Alchemists of the Dusk Sea, originally came out on the PlayStation 3 between 2012 and 2014. These new ports update the games with new features and include content from the game's various DLC expansions. And if 3 updated JRPGs this week wasn't enough, have one more with The Alliance Alive HD Remastered, a 3DS title updated for consoles late last year and now making its way to Steam. For something a little more high concept, Light Matter is a first-person puzzle game that invokes Portal in that Doctor Who episode where the shadows eat people. Meanwhile, Super Crush KO is a neat-looking action platformer with a cool art style and more than a little bit of Dragon Ball Z influence. Speaking of which, Dragon Ball Z Kakarot releases this week on PC and consoles, just in case you wanted to relive the entire Dragon Ball Z storyline in a video game for yet another time. For something more retro, Lena's Inception is a Zelda-inspired action game with some randomly generated worlds, multiple art styles, 2-player local co-op, and definitely some meta elements to its story. Looks cool. Finally on Steam, Redbow is a neat-looking horror game that, I'm not sure what it's about or what you're supposed to do, but I'm curious to find out. Over on the Epic Game Store, Sundered Eldritch Edition is this week's free game, a Metroidvania-style game from the creators of Jotun. It's probably worth the price of admission. On the Nintendo Switch, Squidlet Inc. is a pretty ballsy developer, making a squid-based game in the Game Boy aesthetic and then putting it on a Nintendo system. And what's one more JRPG for the road? Literally, I suppose, as Seek Hearts on the Switch actually can be played on the road. Sorry James is a disconcerting-looking game that mixes creepy text conversations with number puzzles, and I guess there's even one more JRPG re-release to note this week. At least I think it's a JRPG. Tokyo Mirage Sessions Sharp FE Encore is a Switch version of the Wii U title that sees pop-up idols team up with Fire Emblem characters for reasons. As usual, gamers that supported the Wii U will feel pressured to buy the same game again for the Switch to get those new songs and characters. That leaves us with this week's awesome video. Instead of a trailer for the 3rd season of The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, Netflix decided to produce an original music video. I dig it, and I hope it starts a new trend.
Knock, knock, knock on the gates of hell. Guess who's back with another spell? Satan always gets his way, but I don't play the devil's game.
That's it for this week, so what Pokemon do you hope gets put back into the roster? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this, maybe give this one a like and share while you're at it. Not to game the YouTube algorithm, I just really appreciate the positive reinforcement. I hope you enjoyed the video and have a great week!